Hey everyone, welcome to the Literary Lounge. I'm Paige.
And I'm Emily.
And today we are going to be talking about Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. Our question of the week is, what is something you've learned about death as you've gotten older?
Probably a lot of things. I would say probably just how unfair it is.
Yeah.
Like when I was younger, really like my first interactions with death were like my dad's parents, my grandparents. They passed when I was pretty young. I was like kindergarten and then first grade. So I feel like everybody's different, but when you're that age, you don't, at least I didn't totally grasp what that meant. And I think in the moment too, I was like, oh, well, they're older, they've reached the end of their lives and that's just the way the cookie crumbles kind of thing. Like that was fairly easy to grasp. As I've gotten older, like I'm fairly fortunate to not have lost anybody really, really close to me. Like both my parents, like God willing, they're still alive, and I hope that they are, till old age. Like same thing with like my sister, like friends. I haven't lost anybody that I've been really, really close to. I mean, my grandma passed away like a year and a half ago, and that was really hard because she struggled with Alzheimer's for like a really long time. She actually passed away. Kind of the last thing that did it was COVID. She was exposed to COVID in the nursing home she was in, and that felt really unfair. It felt really unfair that she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's like in her 60s, and then just going that way, like, and you could argue that she's no longer suffering and stuff, and we'll get into all that with how the author feels about, like people being in hospitals and nursing homes and just having that whole experience prolonged. But that felt really unfair, and I know there's other people out there that have lost people really, really close to them, and like, to cancer, car accidents, things you don't see coming. And I can't even imagine how that feels, like not seeing it coming. Yeah. I think. So I think just I've learned how unfair it is, how sudden and earth-shattering it can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's like how my best friend died from.
Yeah, Cole.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He was killed by, well, he survived the accident, but it was because of the accident.
The drunk driver. Yeah. In high school.
So yeah, like I understand like how death being unfair, like you're more realizing that as you get older. I think for me too, like it's just that as I've gotten older, like you just kind of realize it becomes inevitable.
Yeah.
Just because like when you're younger, you kind of think like you're invincible, like you are like you're gonna live for forever.
Yeah.
And like you think your parents
are
gonna live forever, and like they're just always gonna be around, and it's just like that's not the case.
Yeah.
So many things can happen. We should have said the trigger warning before we got into this, but there is gonna be death in the conversation.
This entire conversation is about death.
Yes.
Yeah. So sorry, we should have done that sooner, but
I'll put it in the description of the podcast. But yeah, I mean, that pretty much is like what I've learned as I got older.
Yep.
About death. But yeah, I mean, this book, it talks a lot about death. It's not for everyone. And yeah, we'll just kind of get into like deeper conversations about it and some of the stories that she told. It is, in a sense, gonna be spoiler free. In a sense, because like we're not gonna be going into too much detail on what she's like written. It's gonna be more of a conversation about like the topics that she wrote about.
Yep.
So even if you haven't read it, you should be fine to listen to it, I would think. What do you think,
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because like you said, we're not going to go into every story that she shares in this book from her experiences working in a crematory. We're just going to talk about, like, I guess the spoiler part might be, like you said, the topics or the things that she argues through her experiences, where we're going to talk about maybe how we feel about it, if we agree, disagree, things that were alarming. I mean, you pick a book about a crematorium, yeah, it's going to be morbid. Like, so we'll talk about some of those things that were seemed really bizarre to us, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I picked this book because, well, A, had good ratings, B, it's spooky season, but I feel like that's kind of wrong to be like, oh, death is a spooky season conversation. It's like, I don't know, now I'm kind of like beating myself up about it a little bit because I'm like, that happens all year round to people. Like, it's not a spooky season topic, but it was creepy for sure, some of the stuff.
Yeah, but we're also getting, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're also getting into Dia de los Muertos too, is going to be coming up too. So, I mean, that's like celebrating the dead as well. So,
that's true.
It still relates.
Yep, applicable. Also, like, I find death, like, very, very scary. I mean, I think most people do probably, but like, I actually went through this, like, this is kind of weird, but like, as a kid, I went through a phase where like I thought I was gonna die. Yeah. Like, I think maybe it was when I was getting a little bit older where I realized it can happen at any point in time. Mm-hmm. And like, I remember like not being able to sleep at night, and I would tell my mom, like, I think I'm gonna die. And she's like, you're not going to die. Like, you're fine. Like, she tried to like comfort me and tell me that it doesn't just happen. And it kind of does. I think she was just trying to tell me, like, you're healthy and you are fine, like, that sort of thing. But, like, like, mentally, it was, like, very consuming, I think, realizing, like, how real death is.
Yeah. I think, like, I kind of went through something similar to that, too, when I was younger. I feel like that's, like, a stage.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people go through that. And, like, I also went through a stage, like, where I thought my parents were just gonna die.
Yeah.
Like, and I was just terrified, you know? Yep. So, but, I mean, yeah, like, as I said, like, it's inevitable. Like, you could die in a car accident. You could, like, you never know. You could be completely healthy and something could happen.
Yeah.
You never know. So.
That's why they say live every day like it's your last, which is morbid, but true in a sense. Like, you just, like you said, you don't know. So.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway, let's get into this book.
All right.
Oh, I forgot to mention drink. Oh, themed drink of the podcast. We are drinking the Crematory cider. Paige is just drinking regular apple cider. I'm drinking a spiked cider. Has a cinnamon stick, some good spices in it. Our recipe is posted if you are looking for that. It is very toasty, cozy, spooky season vibes.
Yeah. All right, now let's get into it.
Yeah, okay. So just high level, like, this book, it's a memoir. So the author, Caitlin Doughty, she, at a very young age, like, had a morbid curiosity about death. And, like, as she got older, she knew she wanted to work, like, for a crematory. Her long-term goal is to be a funeral director. Like, this has always kind of been what she wanted to do. So this book is really about her experiences through that as she's gotten older. There's a couple different things that I think led to her interests in this particular topic. I think just having a morbid curiosity is probably enough. There's a lot of people out there that obviously are interested in this sort of thing because we have funeral directors, people that perform autopsies, do embalmings, all that stuff. So there are people out there that are interested in that sort of thing and care about it. And I think that was part of it for her. The other thing was, like, how she witnessed that young girl die in the mall. Mm-hmm. At a very young age, she watched a young girl fall 2 stories.
Wow.
And hit the floor, and she died.
Yeah.
She calls, I think the chapter is called The Thud, if I'm remembering that correctly.
That's
but
sad.
Can you imagine, even now, seeing that? But seeing that as a child, how eye-opening that would be?
That's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, she talks about that. She talks about just having an interest in it growing up. And then just, like, the things that she experiences in the crematory, the bizarre encounter she has with people, like family members and whatnot, just how hysterical some people can be with the death of their loved ones. I mean, I feel like that's valid. Everybody grieves differently, but she definitely had some, like, interesting stories. I guess, like, what surprised you most when you were reading this book? Like, was there any, like, facts or or scenarios where you're like, wow, I did not know that, or like I can't imagine that happening?
Yeah. One of them was, and you're probably
I did this last week. Hold on.
one of them is, and you're probably gonna say this too, is like the Brazilian practice from that one tribe, or I don't know if it's like all of Brazilian culture, but nice.
Just like people on YouTube know what's going on.
Yeah. How they resort to cannibalism when someone dies.
Yeah. Did you just hear me swallow?
Yeah, so I did. I don't know if the mic did though.
Okay, keep going. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So that like surprised me, and then another one that surprised me, and I kind of wanted to look more into this, and I could be getting some of the details wrong. But how the Chinese culture use it, they like hire grief
death doulas?
No, it was like grieving professionals.
Okay.
Or something that hype up the grieving process to make sure like everyone is like grieving to their max.
Yeah.
At least that's like what she was talking about. That's why I wanted to look more into it. Because I just never knew that, you know?
Yeah.
And I wanted to know if it was like true or not. But
yeah.
Do you remember that part? When they were like, they were the first family that was like viewing the actual cremation.
Like the witness cremation.
Yep. And they were like filming it, and they hired like grieving professionals.
Oh.
That were like actors to like hype up the grief.
Oh.
Yeah.
Must have zoned out at that part.
Yeah, and like I could be getting some of the details wrong. Side note, I DNF'd this book. So I just like was having a very hard time like paying attention to it. Mm-hmm. So I was just like constantly like rereading and reading through it and not actually like taking in any of the information.
Yeah.
Like zoning out the entire time I was reading it. So I could be getting some of the details wrong, but like that is what surprised me. Those two things. Yeah, also the baby chapter surprised me a lot too.
That was really tough to read about.
Yeah. Like they have like scheduled days like weekly that they just go pick up the group of babies that died that week to cremate
from
them.
The hospital. Yeah.
And like how she like brought like the gurney in there. Mm-hmm. And the guy's like, why didn't she just bring a box? Because I guess the other guy who typically does like the pickups like just puts all the babies in a box. Like, it's just sad.
Yeah, well, and then did you read the part about how the pregnant woman, like went in to like schedule her crematory for her baby or something like that, crematory appointment or like embalming or something that she needed from them, and it wasn't Caitlin that was talking to her, but somebody else that she worked with, I think, was like, oh, well, at least you have like another one along the way. Like definitely not the right thing to say. And she was planning it for the baby inside of her.
Oh,
because the baby was not alive.
Sad. No, I didn't. Maybe I got like about halfway through, a little over halfway, and then I DNF'd it. So wherever that was,
it was probably not that long after.
Okay,
where you got to, but
it wasn't the same chapter as the baby chapter.
I think it was somewhere in there.
Oh, so maybe I did, and I just like missed it.
I don't know though. I feel like you wouldn't have missed that with like where you're at right now. Like, was this hard to read about? Like being pregnant?
That one was, and I think like the thing that bothered me the most and made me decide to DNF it was when and I talked to you about this a little bit, but dang, I should have found the exact quote. But she was like during the baby part, she was talking about like how, I'm not gonna get into like the morbid details, you can read that for yourself if you want, but how it's sad to like the babies are like the saddest to cremate, even when they have stupid names like Caitlin spelled this way instead of this way. And I was like, you're literally making fun of a dead baby's name. Like, that's awful. Like, this family just lost their most prized possession, and you're commenting on the name. Like, it's just kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what made me just not like this author at all.
Yeah, that was like too far for sure.
Yeah.
This author definitely has dry humor. There was certain things I thought was kind of funny. There's other parts where I was just like, that's fine.
Well, they
whatever.
advertise it to be a funny book. They're like, it's morbidly funny. It's like, and like all the reviews on the back from the magazines and whoever the fuck reviews.
Yeah.
Were saying like, oh, it was so funny. And like, I literally did not laugh once. Like, I didn't find anything funny. I was like, no, just didn't hit right with me.
Yeah, I agree. I listened to the audiobook. She narrated the audiobook. And so sometimes I feel like that can help
when they're like, when if they're saying it
the delivery
way. Yeah.
So I think that benefited in some instances, and there was other instances it was just like, oh, this feels like comedic relief, but it's fine. I'm not laughing. Other people probably would laugh at that kind of stuff. Like, there are certain things, but anyway, back to the topic. So, anything else that surprised you?
From what I read, no. But there's probably some stuff that surprised you that I didn't read. So,
yeah,
what surprised you throughout
a lot of things. I mean, so starting with like the crematory process. Like how the bones don't burn.
Yes, that actually is what surprised me because I did not know that. But then, like, when people have house fires, that's how they identify it too, is by bones.
That makes a lot of sense.
I know, but like I never I just thought like the cremation machine like got hot enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that did surprise me. I forgot. I was just gonna say that when you were going into it.
I guess I don't know like the whole construction and like science behind like a cremation machine, but I guess I just assumed that they got hot enough where they would burn. Like, I just literally pictured you pull the body, air quotes, body out when it's done.
Yeah.
And it's a pile of ashes.
That's what I thought too.
But it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like there's quite a bit of cleanup associated, and like then the bones go in like the bone blender.
Ugh.
Yeah. She was talking about how when they cremate overweight people, how the fat like runs out of the machine and onto the floor, and it like got on her one time.
Yeah, I think I stopped right around that part.
Yeah, as I say these things out loud, I'm like, there's probably people listening to this right now that are like, I'm definitely not reading that book, and other people that are like, that's interesting,
right up my alley.
Yeah. So just I guess how like dirty it is. I mean, what do you expect though? Like, they're literally like working with human remains, ashes and stuff, but it's like, I guess I didn't realize like how dirty she actually would get while she was working.
Yeah, like one time she said like she came home and she was like, now I need to go rinse off my human dust. Like,
yeah,
ick.
Yeah, that would be hard to
like you're
think
breathing
about.
that in.
Yeah. The baby part was hard to read. I guess people die at all ages, so I guess it's not, too surprising that they're cremating babies. Like, some people opt for that if they've lost their little one. The other part that surprised me was how she was talking about when people donate their bodies to science.
Yeah.
I guess this isn't too shocking, but how you don't get to specify where your body goes to, whether people are going to be practicing plastic surgery on you, or if like you're going to help cure cancer. Like, it could be anything. And again, morbid, but she talked about how some like body parts were missing and things, or they'd get sent like a leg to cremate or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Well, that instance, it was the guy. There was gal, somebody that was diabetic, and they lost their leg, and so she cremated a leg.
To be fair though, like plastic surgery isn't just like getting a facelift and stuff. Like, it's a lot of plastic surgeries like burn victims and like
that's true. That's fair.
Reconstruction surgery, and so it's not like all like cosmetic.
Yeah, that's true.
So
yeah, but I guess like I didn't really think about how obviously you're not alive. You don't get a say as to what happens to your body when you donate to science. And I'm not saying that like I wouldn't be open to that thing or that other people shouldn't be open to it. It's just learning a little bit more about it was interesting. Yeah, and I guess just like her whole argument, and we'll get there, about how our society isn't really open to death. I that was eye-opening to me, I guess, and I can see where she's coming from. Again, we'll get there, but there's just a lot of different things, I guess, with this book that really made me think.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So after reading the book and like learning about like the whole cremation process and everything, has it like changed your opinions on the subject?
kind of. Like, so she talks a lot about how like embalming is very much like Western society, where that's very normal, especially like with my experiences with death. Like when my grandparents passed away when I was really young, they're both open casket, and so that was kind of like my experience with death, was like seeing people in caskets. Other funerals I had been to, you know, like family friends that had passed away or whatever, like were always open casket. And actually, that's hard to see.
Yeah.
At any age. And I struggled with that, definitely. Like, so I always thought that that was the normal thing to do, I guess. And then my grandma that passed away like a year and a half ago, she was cremated. And I always thought it was kind of interesting how she wanted to be cremated. My grandfather, who's still alive, that they were married for a very long time, he also wants to be cremated. And so I just remember when I first heard that thinking, well, that's interesting. That doesn't seem normal. Most people want to be embalmed and want to have, be buried in a casket. And so thinking about myself, what I want, I don't know. This is not me going on the record saying that I want to be cremated, but I think I'm a little bit more open to it now, knowing kind of what that process looks like.
Yeah. For me, like, I want to be cremated just because, like, I can't, I mean, obviously I'm dead at this point, like, but, like, just, like, even thinking now, like, my body in the ground, like, decaying.
Yeah.
It just, like, freaks me out. Like, I think I'd rather just be cremated. And, like, I also like the idea of, like, spreading, like, ashes in, like, places. Like, I was just, as I was reading this, I, like, asked David, like, his opinions on it. And I was like, well, if I, like, die before you, like, I would think it'd be really cool. I don't even know the legality of this, but, like, I want my ashes spread in Paris. But then I'm like, is it legal to,
This is like a morbid thought, but I'm just picturing David like at the top of the Eiffel Tower, just like making it rain on everybody at the bottom.
That's how I want it.
All right.
Kidding.
Well,
but I don't think
hopefully we don't have to think about that, but
yeah,
good to know.
Yeah, I don't think you can bring them on a plane though without like some sort of like,
yeah,
or spread them in another country.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's like certain areas you are not allowed to dump human remains.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, even like no. Definitely, like obviously do it legally, but like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like like it's just like a cool I love Paris. Like I would live there if I could. I don't know.
That's where your soul belongs.
It's just a
Paris.
thought. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I definitely like appreciate that about this book, like just educating myself more on like the cremation process.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we can kind of get into like the heavier topics, but like the author argues that like as a society, as I said, like the United States doesn't, in her opinion, doesn't accept death. We're always trying to cover it up. We're not really ever coming to terms with it. And like really educating ourselves about it. So like, do you agree that that's how it is, or would you argue that we are pretty open to it as a society?
In ways, I am kind of on both sides with it. So like the points that she makes is like how, and you were kind of talking about this earlier too, but how like we prolong death, like you just like kind of try as hard as you can to prevent death from happening, even though it's inevitable. Like but like she does make points about like how like in the sense of like covering it up, like she was talking about like, oh well, we like doll up the embalmed, like to make them look presentable for the family and stuff, and like kind of like hinting like that's wrong, but like at the same time, like the way I see it, like from a viewpoint of like the onlooker, or like the family member is like, I would rather see someone peaceful and dolled up and like at their best when they're dying than however they died.
Right.
Like, in a car accident, like mauled up or like, like it, I would rather have that last memory of them seeing them like that than how they actually looked when they died, depending how they died. Some people may say like that's not accepting reality and but like I don't think like in this, like, it's death is such a sensitive topic. I don't think you should have to I guess in that. So
I think it's like you said, it's however you choose to grieve. Like and again it is the choice sometimes if things are planned out of the person that's died, if they had a plan in place. Other times it was sudden and they didn't, maybe they were young and like the family has to make a decision. So like you, I see both sides where I definitely see her argument where like she's arguing that, embalming bodies and then people seeing their loved one all made up and in a nice dress or whatever, like, is not really accepting where they're at, like that they're actually gone. But at the same time, like you said, like they want to maybe remember them at peace. I guess I could see where maybe it would almost be better to just not see them at all.
Yeah, and I like that again is like your opinion, and like all this is also her opinion, and it's like I don't think she really has the right to diss on a culture's way of grieving, but then praise another culture. Like everyone has their own way of grieving, and I feel like she did that a lot. Like she really hated on the way the United States like handles death and like grieving, but like that's our culture. Like that's how we deal with it. And like everyone has their own way. Just like that Brazilian tribe with the cannibalism, or like all the other cultures that she talked about too, like it's all different. So like how can you say one way is right and the other way is not,
Right. Yeah. I think I kind of think that maybe not seeing them at all maybe is where I lean towards. Just remembering them at their best.
Yeah, exactly.
When they were alive, healthy, happy. Like my mom always says how when my grandma passed, so when my grandma was alive and she had Alzheimer's, it was so hard for us to see her like that because she used to be so bubbly, lively, fun. And then when they have Alzheimer's and it gets really bad, like, they're not who they were. They're very quiet and just like not all there anymore. And so she said that when my grandma passed, she suddenly, all of her memories of like who my grandma was before that, like all came back to her. And so I feel like it's kind of like, I mean, again, my grandma was cremated, so we, didn't have like an open casket for her or anything. And I think that could be attributing to that a little bit. Like, just she's not suffering anymore. And we remember her as who she was in her best years. So
yeah,
I could see that, not seeing them, how that could be beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. I would probably prefer not to see.
Yeah.
But
what was interesting, random, just on this topic, like she talks about the green burials or the green deaths, natural burial, where I can't remember where they do this. I think you can have this done in the United States in certain plots of land or areas that allow this, but like how you can just be buried as is, like they don't try to prolong the decay or embalm or anything like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. Like I would be interested to like read about that a little bit more. Like,
yeah. Well, they also have too. I mean, I think you have to be cremated in this too, but you can like come back as like a tree. Like you can like get cremated and they use your ashes as like the nutrients and stuff. For
oh,
a
really?
Tree.
Oh, that's
so
sweet.
It's like you can plant, or your family members can plant your tree.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
There's so many ways, but
yeah, that's really interesting. Another thing that she talked about later on in the book that I don't think you got to was how a lot of like the Disney movies, like especially she mentioned Little Mermaid, are based off like Brothers Grimm tales. So actually they're very, very morbid, true stories that have been diluted to be more appropriate for children. And she talks about how, again, arguing that like our society is not open to learning about death and like being more educated on it. She thinks that like children or like us as a society should be having those conversations at a much earlier age. And like maybe, I can't exactly remember how she argued we should go about it, but maybe just that like some of these like princess movies could be a little bit more realistic as to like what people go through. How do you like, what do you think about that? Like children's movies having death in them.
I mean, some of them do have death in them.
Yeah, like have you seen Bambi?
Yeah. Like, no, I don't agree with that. I think that's fucking traumatizing. And like you just said, like you saw your grandparents' open casket like when you were really little, and that like kind of
that was kind of scary. Yeah.
Like I don't know. I think that's up to the individual person if they'd want that. But no, I don't think that Disney needs to change their movies based on her opinion.
Right.
So
I think it is one of those things that I think it should be talked about, and I don't think there's anything wrong with children being exposed to the concept at an early age, but I think it's one of those things that should come from the parents, how we decide to communicate that to our future children, what that conversation is going to look like. I definitely think like there are moments where you have no choice but to address it with your child, like grandparent dies or somebody's passed away and they don't know why. Like you have to be able to create a sort of delivery for that. I think it's kind of up to the family as to what that's going to look like. But I definitely agree with the concept that it should be talked about. I'm really big on like communication and like that.
I agree with that part. Yeah. But like the fact that with those like Grimm tales or whatever they're called, like I've heard those are pretty messed up. And to like
Little Mermaid gets her like tongue chopped off.
Yeah. So like to make that into like a kid's movie is not necessary.
Ariel loses her tongue. Like,
yeah.
Can you imagine watching that as a kid?
Exactly. It's not necessary. Like leave it up to the parents.
Yeah.
Like if you want to teach your kid that, then yeah, go ahead. If you don't, then don't. Like that's your decision. But yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said too. Like for me personally, like I agree. Like it probably should be talked about a little more, but it doesn't need to be like that morbid.
It probably doesn't need to be Disney's responsibility to
exactly
teach our children about death. But yeah, totally stand with the statement that like we don't talk about it enough. I mean, you and I literally at the beginning of this episode talked about how neither of us really understood it at a young age, and how when we started to realize it was a thing, how very mentally challenging that was.
I think too, like you want to do it in a way too where it's not going to instill more fear into your kids. Because like I could see like the conversation. I feel like it's such a touchy subject, so you'd have to approach it perfectly in order to like not traumatize the kids and make their worry. Like you want to like relieve their worries and like kind of still give them peace with it, and like you don't want to make the situation worse.
Yeah,
like,
you don't want to scare them.
Exactly.
I'm a big fan of books. Obviously, we have a book podcast. I bet that there are books out there, and if there aren't, maybe this is my chance or your chance to write a book. But like it, and these are things that you can kind of look into ahead of time before giving it to your child. But if there was a book about death that communicated in a way that I agreed with, I think that would be a good way to have a conversation and like read it together and make it more productive than anything. Maybe that's something that you read when a loved one passed away, and just that helps them understand maybe from like a picture book perspective. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Maybe we can write a book about it.
Maybe, book. But I don't even know how I'd go about that conversation.
That's true. Here we are. We're like, and I probably should preface, neither of us are professionals in the subject. No. This is just all speculation based on what we've read and our own personal experiences. So.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So at the end of this book, Caitlin talks about like good deaths versus bad deaths. What do you consider a good death?
I agree with like her definition of a good death to a sense where, you know, having your life prolonged from a very like cruel disease like Alzheimer's or something is not a good death. It's sad for everybody involved. Having gone through it, I can say that. I see why we do it though. I mean, for especially those that are still alive, the loved ones and stuff, you want this person around and like so that all makes sense to me, like why things are the way they are and why we're trying to find cures and in ways medications and things that help people. I'm all for that. But I agree with her where that's a tough death, right? So I guess a good death is going in your sleep at a very, very old age, and hopefully at that point in time you're still with it, which is sad because it's so sudden to people around you if they didn't see it coming, but at the same time then they didn't suffer.
Exactly.
So that's what I would say. What about you?
I would agree with that. I mean, again, I didn't make it to the end of the book, so like I didn't read like what her definitions of it were. So like going by like what you said, like I agree with everything you said about like good deaths. Like I think it's a good death would be going like in your sleep or like just quick. You know, not prolonged,
not suffering or not, you know,
not on life
losing
support
your
for
capabilities and
I know like we talked a little bit about this before the podcast, but I think it's Sweden.
Okay.
Where it's some country in Europe where like they have assisted suicides. So like you have that option to end your life if you're like going down a path of like a chronic disease or like a terminal disease. And obviously that's not in everyone's beliefs, but at the same time, like you don't have that option here. And like you'll hear, I'm sure like a lot of the listeners also have experienced this of like a family member telling them like, oh, don't ever put me in a nursing home, and if I get Alzheimer's, don't let me progress. Like I just want to go. But it's like we don't have a say in that. Like there's nothing we can really do with the nursing home aspect. We have a say in it. But like with like Alzheimer's or like any disease, like you can't just like be like, oh, they said they didn't want to live, so pull the plug. You know, like you can't just do that here. And it's sad because like I've had family members tell me that like don't let me get that way, you know. But it's like there's nothing you can do about that here. So
you're going through it because nobody's gonna take care of it, you know. Like that. That's not an option. Basically the only thing we have like that would be like a do not resuscitate.
But like in certain but even then though, like there are loopholes with do not resuscitates.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know a lot about that.
I'm not going to get into it, but there can be loopholes. But I just in a sense like if that's like in someone's like will, like their wish is to like not get to that point, and cuz like especially with Alzheimer's, like you're not the same person you were anymore usually. So like as much like as maybe your family is like holding on to you and wanting to keep you around, like that's not fair, like if you didn't want to go through that. So like it's sad to think like you don't have a say in that when it's your life.
And that's kind of what she argues in the book about how like I can't remember how she talked about suicide. She wasn't like pro suicide, but it kind of seemed like she understood a little bit more of why people do that. As sad as that sounds, like, so I think we're all kind of on the same page as what's a good death and what's a bad death, you know? So
for sure.
It's all so sad and really makes you think.
So what are your final thoughts? Did you like this book? What's your rating?
I would give it a 3.5. The things I liked about it is that I learned a lot. I thought she had like a background in medieval history that's what her degree was in college. So when she was incorporating like the Tibetan monks, the Brazilian tribe, the medieval times, like talking about how all these different groups of people in times handled death, that was very interesting. I thought the cremation process was interesting. Yeah, I appreciated what I learned. I think I agree with you where some of the humor didn't necessarily land for me, not trying to bash or anything. It just didn't hit for me maybe the way that it would hit for some other people. It was morbid. It delivered on that, that's for sure. There was some things that I was kind of like, ooh, okay, let's move on. Other times I was like, wow, that's really interesting in a creepy way. So it was a roller coaster, that's for sure. Some parts I was kind of zoned out a little bit listening to it. It was just kind of all the things. So that's how I feel.
Yeah.
What about you?
So as I said before, I DNF'd it. My rating would probably be a 1. 1 star. I just, and I'm gonna bash a little bit here.
Yeah.
I thought the author was very immature in her writing. Again, like we've said, like the humor didn't land with me at all. Like I didn't laugh once during it. I thought the immaturity around like the baby names, and there was also other instances of it as well. It was just kind of pissed me off. But like I kind of felt the opposite of you. Like I thought this book was, and this is probably my fault for not like reading more about the synopsis before I read it, but I thought it was going to be more stories of her time working in the crematorium instead of like most of it was like history. And that's like not the part that I was interested in. Like I love scary movies, and like I love like the messed up scary movies, you know?
Yeah.
Like I wanted to hear about like some of like maybe some more stories about her working in the crematorium that were a little more like messed up, and like learning more about like what it was like to work in a crematorium instead of like the culture around death and like how it's handled in different cultures. Some of it was interesting, don't get me wrong. Like it was cool to learn about how some cultures handle death, but I think there was just so many like random facts that were tossed around in there that were like kind of like that was a little unnecessary to throw in there. And I just like found myself just spacing out most of the time reading it until like something like really morbid came up that like piqued my interest, and then it was gone again. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, but I'm sure obviously from the reviews, there are a lot of people that did enjoy it. So it just wasn't up my alley, which is really weird because that's usually up my alley is like that kind of stuff. But
that's the thing about this book, and we talked about this before the podcast, how you were surprised you didn't like it, is like the type of person that picks up this book is interested in this kind of book. If you don't want to read about death, if you don't want to learn about crematories, you're not going to read this book. It is what you see is what you get. So yeah. I'm sure probably a lot of the good ratings have to do with the fact that it delivered on what these people were looking for.
Exactly.
The masses probably felt that it was satisfactory.
Yep. You made a good point too before the podcast. God, what was it now? I just had it in my head. This pregnancy brain is fucking getting me.
I don't remember. We talked a lot before this episode.
Jeez. God, what was it? I literally just had it in my head until I said, oh, that point you brought up earlier that it was gone.
Yeah.
Dang it. Wait, what did you just say again?
About how like people that pick up this book like want to read it. Like this is what they were looking for.
Damn, thought that would spark it, but didn't.
Okay, that's all right.
Shoot. What did you say that sparked my memory of that?
Like the people that are reading it they want to read this kind of book?
No,
I don't know.
No, I can't remember. Sorry.
A fleeting thought. It's gone with the wind. Yeah. Anything else?
No. That's pretty much my thoughts on it.
Yeah. Well, reading anything right now? Read anything recently?
Gonna start Salem's Lot.
Okay.
We're gonna be doing an episode on that in October, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, what about you?
I am thinking of starting Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. It's a science fiction book. He wrote The Martian.
Okay.
That became a movie. I'm sure you've heard of it. But
Yeah.
This Project Hail Mary is also a very popular book of his.
Is it a football book?
No. It's a like space astronaut book. Too.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I haven't read a science fiction in a while, and I hear good things. So,
yeah, science fiction. Okay, yeah. I just thought Hail Mary and then like football.
Oh yeah.
But yeah,
well,
nice.
You never know. He doesn't have to just write about space, but it seems like he does. So,
yeah.
Anyway,
All
cool.
Right.
Well, thanks for joining us. That was our episode. If you liked this episode on Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, leave us a 5-star review on if you're listening on a podcast platform, or give us a rating on YouTube if you liked it. We always appreciate the feedback that we get from everybody. Our giveaway is still active. We are giving away a copy of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. It has its own YouTube video, so you just go to that video, listen to the instructions, and you can enter in to win that. Next week, we are going to be having a discussion on horror and thriller books. So we're just doing a book talk, spoiler-free. So tune in if you want to hear about our favorites, maybe ones we didn't like, some that are just plain weird. We're going to get into all of it. So keeping on with the spooky season. So with that, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.